Gary.
Hey, buddy. Hello, mate.
Hey, long time no see.
I know. That's a lovely blue room. It looks like you're at sea.
Well, I'm very disappointed to report, Gary, I'm actually in the northeast of England in my study.
Well, my study is kind of in the kitchen because we're kind of not set up for this in central London. We've got the smallest house in the world that's the most expensive to rent. And it's for some reason, we've got builders to the left of us, builders to the right of us, builders above us, all the way through this. And for some reason today, I live like 20 yards away from Selfridges. Can't get a signal.
Oh, you're
Can't get a
kidding
signal.
me.
So the reason for living here is my wife doesn't like cooking. I don't like cooking. I love drinking in pubs and we eat out all the time. Right.
Perfect.
So we had we've been here for 9 years, £6,000 a month. I shit you not.
Wow.
And we've just had the kitchen redone, but one ring on the hob, 9 years, never used.
Are you serious? Gary, I think you should keep that to yourself. I mean, that's quite an incredible achievement, but hey, let's not brag about that, right?
Well, no, fuck them. It's aspirational. Fuck them all. If I want people, fuck them all.
Well, you know what? I agree with you. And my current reasoning for being able to go out most evenings for dinner and drinks is to support local hospitality businesses. But the reality is, Gary, like you, why would you spend an hour after a long day in the kitchen when you can go out for 2 people, bottle of wine, 3-course for 100 quid? I mean, what's the point?
I know. Is this totally recorded, by the way? I'm just trying to check. I can't see Rec in the corner.
I think it is,
yeah,
Gary.
Yeah, it is,
I think it is. So please do cut all of this out.
No, I have to do a cut with that. I've got to say it as well. I'm so delighted that the pubs are open, so I can drink less.
Well, you know what? You're right. People keep saying, "Oh, isn't it nice to go out and have a beer now?" It's like, no. I actually feel as if I'm drinking less now the pubs are open again because I don't go through my sort of 5 litres of booze every Friday, Saturday afternoon.
What are you on about? Literally, I've been drinking a bottle of vodka every day, and the doctor's finally said, "Whoa, Tigger." So yeah, but I've woken up. My missus is now man-to-man marking me. I've woken up the last 4 days without a hangover. I didn't know the world felt like that. That's
right.
new.
How odd, eh? How odd. I mean, the world's an awful place. If I was you, Gary, I would just keep drinking. I tell you, the worst part of drinking is not the hangover, but in fact being sober thereafter.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
And I tell you, regardless of drinking, you know, a certain amount of alcohol, you're looking very bloody well, Gary. So keep doing what you're doing, mate.
I'm shifting a bit of timber. I'm playing tennis every morning and we're having a good time.
You look good. You look good. And where are you playing tennis then, given where you're physically living?
Regent's Park.
Oh, right. Neat. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we're there at 7 o'clock every morning, waiting for the lions to start roaring from Regent 2 to tell us that the day started. So it's really cool. Right, fella. I've got some stuff. I'm hoping we can rattle this off in 20 minutes to let you carry on about your day.
Perfect,
Thank you very much for doing this.
My
I was speaking
pleasure.
to so the experts in the room, Paul Herman, you and Marcus Archer, of course. And I think that's the dream team, isn't it? So between you guys, it'd be good. So what we're thinking of, we're either going to merge it into one and then do these bits as add-ons and put onto our YouTube and direct traffic to that. Potentially, if they're really strong independently, we'll just run it as a series.
Sure.
We're just going to freestyle it at the moment and see where the value is.
Top man, that works, Gary.
I've got your bit here. You've got some of the words, but we just talk about the sector as you see it, what you think is going on. Very relaxed, very informal. I still take the piss. I look like the shadow because it's the only place in their house. It's like my lighting is dog shit.
No, it's actually, just so you know, from my perspective, actually, it's quite a good lighting, and actually the camera's looking good, Gary. So, hey, stop beating yourself up, my friend. I think it's working.
Right, it's brilliant. Before we start, I will ask you about how you've been and all that stuff. But between me and you, how have you been, mate?
Yeah, you know what, mate? I've been really good. I think from a health perspective, we're all good. You know, my wife and I are able to work quite effectively remotely, Gary. We've got a 3-year-old daughter. You know, she's been homeschooled. So, you know, in the round, things have been as good as they can be. I mean, obviously business, as I'm sure it has been for many of your clients, you know, has been a story of two halves, because actually you can speak to one business that has had the most shittest 4 months of their entire 35-year trading history and is very depressed, very backward looking, very anxious, very nervous. You can then speak to a business actually very similar, in a similar sector, who's performing brilliantly. And of course, those are some of the messages I'm going to try and convey today. But in the round, it's been a really testing 4 months, and I think resilience and hard graft is what definitely has been tested. But thankfully, I've got those two traits in spades.
All right. Well, I wasn't built for lockdown, so it's my wedding anniversary today. But
is it? Congratulations! And you're talking to me, Gary.
No, I'll be honest with you. We didn't even know. This is the first one. It's our 9th. This is the first one we celebrated, and it was only because somebody phoned us up and said, "Happy wedding anniversary." I went,
are you serious?
Is it?
So when did you think you got married then?
I just never knew. I just don't. I'm not really good at dates.
That must have been a bloody good wedding day, Gary.
I just
can't remember it.
The only date I remember is my birthday, my wife's birthday, and I still get the year wrong, and my daughter's birthday. And everyone else is just a bit blurry. I don't remember my mum's. I haven't got my mum's date. I don't remember when she died. I've got nothing. So yeah,
wow,
I don't do dates.
Yeah, I'm a bit of I would really aggravate you then, Gary, because I've got one of these photographic memories. So literally, if you gave me now a sequence of numbers, I would never forget them. So I remember everyone's birthday just because I can't forget.
Did you ever meet Daley Thompson, Daley Kikoyo from SRE?
No, I didn't, but I have heard lots about him, but we never met.
He can do that. He can also remember your postcode, and it will remind that back to you as well. That's horrific.
Spooky. That is spooky.
Yeah, he just gets right on my tits. Right, we'll crack on with this.
Happy anniversary, Gary. Right.
Yeah, thanks, mate. You can chat that in later. That'd be hilarious. Really informal, casual style. You won't be held to account on any of this. And anything that we do that you don't like, you want to take out, just tell me. We'll cut it out, okay? I just need to do this for my edit man, Neil. So hello, LinkedIn. Thank you for checking in again. As I said previously, this is a latest in our series, following on from the RDLC lockdown videos, which went really well, and we love that. So we're trying to interview brilliant people who influence our industry, people who make a difference to us, and people that I like, obviously, because I don't hang around with people I don't like very much. I have a choice. So the latest in the series of the M&A, maximizing shareholder value sessions. Something every recruiter does. You start a business up, and the first thing you do about is work on your exit strategy, some more than others. Now, today's guest is a bit of a legend. So, Carl, you've got quite a lot here. Bear with me while I read it, because I would have just said Carl, M&A God. But yeah, apparently I'm not allowed to do that. So I'm going to read it. So Carl is a partner and the head of corporate finance at the national advisory firm RG. What does RG stand for?
Ryecroft, Glenton, Gary.
Why didn't I know that?
Believe me, some things in life you don't need to know. That's on the list of things.
Okay, yeah. Otherwise, it would have been down there own fault. We specialise in providing advice to businesses in the human capital sector and all aspects of growth, change, transformation, including advisory on company acquisitions and disposals. Exit's a better word, isn't it? MBO, MBIs, refinancing, fundraising projects, whilst helping shareholders build and maximize shareholder value, which is exactly what I want to talk about today. Now, Carl is a leading M&A advisor and one of the nice guys to the sector, which includes the subsectors of recruitment, search, training skills, and has advised on dozens of, and I know quite a few of them, mid-market transactions over the last 10 years, including the sale of Gap Personnel to Trust Tech, the sale of Crimson to Harvey Nash, and the sale of Just Teachers to Sovereign. And you kept your fingers on that one. To name but a few, he sits on boards and he's an advisor and a NED, and obviously a competitor. So as we start, hello, Carl.
Gary, good afternoon to you. What an incredible introduction. Half of it was true, half of it was not, but nonetheless, an exceptional introduction, Gary.
Well, somebody wrote it, so I'm just reading it. But before we start, we were just talking offline about living in lockdown. How's it been for you, and how's it been working at home, and how has it been in that M&A space, specific about recruitment, really?
Sure. I mean, to answer personally, Gary, I mean, first of all, the last 4 months have been odd, I guess is probably the right answer. We've all had to work in a very unusual way, working remotely, not alongside our colleagues and our peers, which definitely, presents lots of challenges. And of course, the economy has been hugely disrupted by COVID. So we've all had our resilience and our work ethic tested to the maximum, but for sure, there are always winners and losers. And today I'm going to try and focus in on, those whom have fared better than others and what we can all do to make sure that we are well placed to bounce back post-COVID. But sure, the last 4 months, Gary, have been really challenging, but there have been a number of opportunities come to the fore, which is definitely what I want to focus in on during this session, Gary.
Well, shall I just let you do that? That sounds perfect. But what would you like to talk about first?
Well, I think, Gary, you asked me the question, what is the M&A landscape like within the staffing sector? So let me try and give some context first. So, I mean, to give some statistics as a start of a 10. So in the first half of 2020, so the 6 months to June, M&A activity within the sector is down 37% versus the same half last year. So of course, that simply means there has been significantly fewer transactions completed in the 6 months to June. I suspect a large proportion of that reduction in deal volume is a direct result of COVID, bearing in mind, actually, in Q1, there was a real activity when it comes to M&A, largely driven by the strong economy. And I think a lot of businesses, Gary, were performing brilliantly well, up until March. And also, of course, the changes that were being introduced in March in relation to CGT and entrepreneurs relief. So there was a huge focus to try and get deals done pre-mid-March. And thank God, we had that incentive, because following, lockdown, M&A activity has definitely been significantly more subdued.
It's really interesting. When you look at some of the stats as well, I think some of the PLCs have opened up all those closets and thrown all their skeletons. So there's an opportunity to throw out all your dead wood, all your numbers, all those bad things that happened, and blame COVID for this moment in time. So it looks like some of the stats that have come out from the robust, bigger PLC numbers, businesses. I think that's impacted everyone's sort of sentiment for what's going on at the moment.
Absolutely right, Gary. And of course, let's face it, the economy is built on a number of different facets. And one of the key ones is, I guess, people's perception in market confidence, which is very emotive. So you're right, a lot of big businesses that have restructured, that have or will soon make redundancies, they're all using COVID as the reason for that. And I'm sure in part there is truth in that. But I also think actually maybe, as you say, some businesses are just using this period of softened performance as an opportunity to cut overhead.
So you have the luxury of, as I do, sort of seeing quite a lot of businesses, what's going on, people doing really well in the same market. Why do you think some businesses are outperforming other businesses in this exactly the same sector?
Sure, great question, Gary. So there's probably three areas that I would pass comment on, albeit there's many more, but the key three areas that we think are differentiating a very successful, highly performing business versus one that is performing less so positively. First of all, has to be geography. if, for instance, it's a generalist IT recruitment business focusing in on the UK, that business will not be performing as well as an IT recruitment business that maybe has a significant proportion of its business sitting in Germany, as an example, within specific areas of technology. So I think geography and where one is generating its revenue from will be having a huge impact on performance. I think secondly, Gary, I guess it's going to definitely be the sectors, and I mean the end industry sectors in which the end hiring clients sit. So again, let's just use an extreme example to prove the point. You know, if your client base is predominantly businesses within the hospitality sector, you know, the last 4 months have been horrid, full stop. Whereas if your end client is e-commerce, your business has only gone through the roof. So I think never before has the end sector of your client base been so important. And a lot of our clients who've completely changed strategy has done so by simply changing the end client base. So if you're an engineering recruitment business, you might not be able to move away from engineering recruitment because it's technically, you know, what your business is known for, and it's the talent that you are able to access and deploy. But whether you place that engineering talent, you know, into, let's say, you know, a sector whereby they are manufacturing goods for, I don't know, let's call it the healthcare market, versus, you know, a sector that is less so buoyant, is very much down to strategy. And the third area, Gary, definitely that's having a huge impact, will be, I'm going to call it delivery model. So, you know, is it a contingent perm recruitment business? Because a contingent perm recruitment business in, let's call it hospitality, fashion, other areas will have not performed anywhere near as well as maybe a business that's placing IT skills through statement of work, and an RPO or master vend business. So I think the delivery model part is so important.
Are you seeing businesses try to pivot? I hate that word, but businesses desperately trying to change what they do, where they do it, how they do it?
Absolutely. And sadly, you know, one of the key things I absolutely, Gary, like yourself and Dean, have to try and bring to the table is the idea of changing course. You know, you hate the word pivot, you know, I hate similar words, but point is, you know, why do tomorrow what you did yesterday and expect different results? It's just insanity, right? So a lot of what we've been doing is helping businesses anticipate what the next 3 to 4 years will have in store economically. We're then looking at the client base they work with. We're looking at their credit worthiness, the sector in which they sit, what we're likely to see. And of course, does that mean we have to repivot or change course? So those businesses that are going to weather the storm will be those, Gary, who can navigate, you know, what's going to be a continued choppy landscape. Those who sit tight, cross arms and wait for the good times to return, well, we'll either have to be incredibly patient or we'll have to have deep coffers, because I do think it's going to get materially worse before it gets materially better.
Well, Dean and I always said we'd love the market to have a light cull, like a small recession, because wouldn't that be great? With 40,000 businesses, they're not all good, but it's death by 1,000 cuts for the good ones.
That's right.
I wonder if we just flip to talk about the acquisition piece at the moment.
Sure.
Is there money floating around? Are people looking for distressed acquisitions so they can, you know, the usual suspects trying to nick some businesses on the cheap? Or have we got some mature players out there who are thinking, because a lot of recruitment businesses, they've had their staff paid for, they've got cash in the bank. That a lot of businesses right at the moment, they're not writing up business, but they're cash rich. And it's where they invest that cash. So potentially, are there organizations out there who are targeting specific niche acquisitions to actually add to the value and add to the part?
Yeah, really good question, Gary. So there's a couple of things in there. So first of all, unlike any other recession or economic downturn that we've seen in our respective lives, there has never been more liquidity. So actually there is liquidity. You know, the reason why businesses aren't performing is not because they can't access funding. It is because they've either had a significant reduction in demand, just because their end client base isn't recruiting, just isn't hiring, or it's because, of course, they are focusing in on sectors that are contracting. But the reason why businesses aren't performing is not because of lack of liquidity, Gary. So what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things. I mean, as you say, a lot of businesses right now are cash rich. but they might be financially not performing well. And of course, that's because the government has propped up UK business. And people will have views as to whether, furloughing, whether CBILS is a good or a bad thing for business. But what I do know is, it has definitely provided businesses with a lifeline, which at some point soon will be taken away. And unless those businesses have started to ride a bike again without stabilizers, as soon as those stabilizers are off, those bikes are going to fall over. And of course, that will present a huge opportunity for large, well-capitalized, listed and or private equity assets who want to go and acquire good businesses for significantly lesser value, Gary, than they would have paid for those same assets 6-12 months ago. So that's definitely one area. If one is looking to acquire a business in an adjacent sector, a new geography, maybe giving access to more recurring revenue, so it could be an RPO or an MV business, absolutely, distressed M&A will feature, albeit probably not till Q1 next year, because of course we'll only start seeing furlough unwinding probably September time. And of course, a lot of the VAT deferral and CBILS loans don't have to start being repaid until early next year. So that's when we're going to see the consequences of the debt pile that the government have gave UK business.
Interesting, but I interviewed Marion Somerset-Webb,
yes.
editor-in-chief of Money Week, and she just said, take every loan that you can, because the government isn't borrowing this money, they're printing it. Yep. And there's likely to be financial jubilees. So take every penny you can. So once these businesses have got this money slushing around behind them, a lot of people are sitting on it thinking, just in case for a rainy day, where I'm telling people to invest. So as if they were to invest, what would a good target look like? So what would that be in terms of sector, and a size of business split, perm contracts, solutions versus traditional recruitment, and location? So if you could a white sheet of paper and come up with the perfect prospect, what might that look like?
Sure, absolutely, Gary. And before I give you that insight, can I just step back just for a moment? Because you asked a great question around, who will the likely acquirers be of businesses? And I think I said that without doubt, there's never been more liquidity. So as you say, there'll be some acquirers, be it large, be it listed, be it private equity backed, who definitely will look to acquire distressed businesses. I think the other two areas that I would definitely say we've seen a significant uptick in activity is large international groups disposing of non-core subsidiaries. So for instance, Trust Tech, a large Japanese business, I know they've been looking at their European footprint to see whether maybe there's value in those businesses outside of the group. We advised on a leverage management buyout of a business called Tech Consult, which was owned by a Norwegian group, but that's now been acquired by the UK management team. And that's because Tech Consult did not want to continue to have an interest in a business here in the UK. So there'll definitely be a number of opportunities for management teams to acquire the businesses they run from their founder, owner, manager, shareholders. So management buyouts are really interesting because there's liquidity in the market, so they can be funded. And of course, the management team, arguably, of any business is a potential acquirer because they know the business that's arguably looking to be sold. I think the only other third area is private equity, Gary. As you absolutely know, PE have a number of interests within the human capital sector, but specifically focusing in on recruitment. So there's lots of private equity backed businesses who will look to utilize some of its liquidity to acquire good businesses. So in answer to your question, what does good look like? Clearly beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but to try and give some very quick context. So I think the first thing a good business has to have is it has to have scalable traits. Because of course, any acquirer is buying a business to grow the business further. So it needs to be a business that has good systems, processes, procedures. It has to be a business that has a really experienced, proven, resilient senior management team who run the business. And of course, resilience will have been tested positively or otherwise over the last 4 months. I think a good business, Gary, from an acquirer's perspective, has to be able to demonstrate that it isn't reliant on either a small handful of consultants. So we want to try and see at least 120K of GP per head coming from each of the consultants across the business. We don't want a lot of performance coming from only a small number of the billing headcount. Client reliance. We don't want to see a business that's got half of its NFI or gross profit, coming from one client. Wouldn't it be brilliant if there were, 100 clients all generating 1% of a business's GP. If one of those clients are lost, it's disappointing, but for sure doesn't compromise the business. I think the other area absolutely is the predictability around the fee income. So a business that has more recurring gross profit will naturally be more valuable to an acquirer than a business that does not. I guess the question as to how you create recurring revenue is one that's often asked, Gary. Certain things are, more contract, less perm might give one confidence that there is more predictability to GP. But of course, there's lots of challenges around contract, what with IR35. So a lot of my clients are moving more toward delivering through statements of work, almost consultancy provision, which definitely is a higher margin way of generating more predictable GP. But rule of thumb is a business generating 2/3 of its GP from contract or temp will be more valuable, more attractive to an acquirer than a business that's generating more than 1/3 of its GP from perm. For sure, client longevity is another way of having predictability, because even if you're a perm-only business, if all of your revenue comes from 10 very large clients, and those clients you have worked with for 10 years on an exclusive basis and retained, then that's giving you a huge amount of confidence over predictability, isn't it? I think the other thing is global footprint, Gary. So at the beginning of the chat, I explained that a business that has the ability to generate revenue from other countries like Germany, like the US, will be performing better than others and therefore likely more valuable to an acquirer. So a business that's got an international footprint with offices in countries whereby we think there are growth expectations placed economically will definitely make those businesses more attractive, because any buyer can scale in those territories. I think finally, a business that's focusing in on either functional areas or industry sectors where there is going to be growth. And I mean midterm growth. So, over the last few months, businesses in the education space, businesses in the hospitality space, businesses in certain areas of white collar professional services like sales and marketing, those businesses have not performed necessarily as well as others. However, that is just a temporary softening in performance, because we all know in the UK, there is a significant shortage of qualified teachers, and there is a significant undersupply of qualified teaching assistants. Students and children have to be taught in a classroom, and because now there are fewer children in any classroom, arguably there'll be a bigger demand for teachers in a market where there already was a significant teacher shortage. So of course, education as an example, the last few months have been difficult, but long term, the education market and a supply agency will perform well. So I think businesses that long term are placing talent into talent scarce sectors will naturally be of huge interest to potential acquirers, Gary.
That's funny. You mentioned education. I think you've just helped talk Dean off a cliff right now. He was saying the other day, is like, it didn't matter what he did, how he did it, that there's nothing that he could do smart, clever, innovative, genius standard that would make a blind bit of difference at the moment. So,
no, but that's short term, isn't it? And I'm sure Dean would agree, Gary, that short term, if schools are closed, then there's no need for supply teachers, for sure. However, we don't buy shares in a business, do we, for short term gain? You've got to invest in shares for long term structural returns. And the reality is, as I would hope Dean would agree, there is going to be a significant opportunity for supply agencies placing teachers into schools here in the UK. But for sure, the last few months have been very difficult for those businesses.
100%. But in typical Dean style, he's recruiting he's recruiting like video. Now the people talk about. So you're talking about an international business with a footprint all over the place. A lot of smaller cap businesses will be looking at what's my starting point? And you do have a lot of CEOs who are a little bit run down. We've all worked all the way through this process. I was a bit knackered, slightly disillusioned. The R word hasn't been mentioned yet. As Marion said, this isn't a recession, but there's probably one in the post. That being the case, some CEOs might be thinking this is a great moment to actually just pass on the reins to somebody else.
Absolutely.
To work with someone like yourself, what's the EBIT, the magic EBIT number where you start to get really excited? So it's 1 million, and then at 5 million, you just everything goes crazy. What are the trigger points?
Sure. So there's two answers to your question, Gary. I mean, when it comes to M&A, for a business to really grab the attention of a potential acquirer, it needs to be generating an EBITDA or a pre-tax profit, Gary, of circa £750,000 plus, because arguably until that point, a business will be of a certain size whereby it will definitely still be reliant heavily on its owner founders, and therefore it's difficult for that asset to be sold and for that value to be retained by the ultimate acquirer. So most acquirers in the market would look for a business that's generating a pre-tax profit, Gary, of £750,000 plus. However, from my perspective, I appreciate that small acorns produce big trees, and therefore actually I would much rather get to work with a business, a board, a management team, many months, many years prior to them contemplating a potential transaction, because it gives me the ability to help them make sure they make the changes they need to make their business incredibly valuable and therefore attractive to a purchaser. So ordinarily, I find myself, Gary, engaged between 2 and 3 years prior to the date when the shareholders ideally would realize value for their business. Therefore, for me, I can get to know a business at any point. Its pre-tax profit is totally irrelevant.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what type of things would you be doing at that point? So you've just ruined half my questions here.
Sorry, Gary. Sorry.
That's right. This means we go to the pub quicker.
Absolutely.
So with when you're shaping a business and you get involved and you're sitting on the board, so much as there's a few people who just do something similar. When you get that luxury to do that, what are the things that you would try to trigger to help businesses maximize shareholder value?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so I guess there's a number of things, but if we think about how a recruitment business is valued first, that might give good context. So as we all may appreciate, a recruitment business typically is valued based on a multiple of adjusted earnings on a cash-free, debt-free basis, allowing for normalized working capital. So there's 5 key numbers that need to go into the equation, Gary, to value a business. So as a corporate finance advisor, my job is to make sure that the board understand those 5 levers, because you can pull each of them to improve value. So let's just try and quickly skirt through those 5 areas to give a bit of context. So in terms of multiple, typically a recruitment business that is generating between £500,000 and £750,000 of pre-tax profit. Let's assume it's 2/3 contract or temp, 1/3 perm. Let's assume it's a good business. That business typically would be valued at 4 to 5 times adjusted profit. So how can you increase the multiple from 4 to 6? That's the question I ask myself and the board. So there's a number of things you can do, and we've discussed many of them just previously, Gary. So can we maybe set up a business in Berlin? Can we start increasing our international footprint? Can we access markets whereby margins are higher? So placing an SAP contractor into Berlin will generate a much higher multiple than maybe the same if you were placing that same contractor here domestically. So we'd look at international footprint, we'd look at how we can scale the business, we'd look at how much of its GP was coming from certain markets, certain consultants, certain locations, and we'd effectively try and reduce business risk by having less reliance on any one client, on any one billing head, on any one geography, because of course that makes for a more diversified business, which will push multiple up. We'll naturally also want to try and drive scale through the business, because more scale typically means a heightened multiple. So as soon as you get beyond the 1 million EBITDA level, the multiple starts ratcheting north. And of course, beyond 2 million EBITDA, likewise. So the more scale the business has, the greater its EBITDA, the heightened the multiple. We'll also be looking at technology, Gary. So how can a business automate itself so that it can become more efficient and can deliver more of its GP down at an EBITDA level? We'll also maybe be thinking about cross-sell within the business. So the more wallet you generate from your existing client base, the stickier the client base becomes. That heightens multiple. So these are all of the things that we're going to be thinking about when trying to take a multiple from 4 to 6. And of course, the end sectors in which you are placing your talent into. So earlier I mentioned an engineering business. Imagine if your engineering business was placing talent into businesses that have been manufacturing medical devices. during COVID. And I know that a couple of your Pirates members, in fact, have done just that, and they have performed just brilliantly as a result. So for sure, that's the first area. And all of that will impact multiple. It should also positively impact profit, or the adjusted EBITDA number used to value the business. Within adjusted EBITDA, of course, it is the profit of the business with certain adjustments. And it's these certain adjustments, Gary, where typically we can add value. So if the business is incurring cost, and those costs are exceptional, non-recurring, one-off costs, so rec-to-rec fees, and or legal and professional fees, and or redundancy fees, all of those things should be added back when finding our true underlying profit figure, i.e. the level of earnings the business would generate under the ownership of a third-party acquirer. So as an advisor, my job is to also start helping the board focus in on the right profit number, and of course the calculation of that profit number thereon. Because if we only increase profit by £100,000 and the multiple is 6 times, that's a £600,000 impact the vendors will see as and when they sell that business. And I'd rather have that £600,000 in my client's pocket than not. So that gives us a multiple of profit. But of course, we then move on to cash. So what can we do to help the business improve its cash conversion? Well, things like credit control. How does the business manage credit control? How are invoices sent out? Do they send out invoices electronically, or do they do that through a third-party agency? How can we reduce the amount of time from sending out an invoice to cash collection? Similarly, when it comes to creditors, I guess the only big creditor in a recruitment business might be outside of HMRC, might be limited company contractors. So again, I've seen, can you believe, Gary, many a time agencies choose to early pay limited company contractors. Why? If you choose to pay early, effectively it means you need more cash in the business to fund working capital. So as and when you come to sell your business, you have to leave more money in the tin. So we try and get our clients to start understanding the impact cash and debt has on value. And of course, the final area is working capital. You know, what can we do to collect cash quicker? Make sure we are only settling our creditors on time each time to try and maximize the ultimate cash position that we are able to allow the shareholders of the business to appreciate on sale. So there's quite a lot of areas, Gary, that you can focus on to manipulate / manage how one can increase the value of the business prior to sale. And those are only really the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, right. That's gold, by the way. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I've only got 2 other questions for you.
Sure,
one
please.
which is aligned to that. There is a fine balance between investing in the future, so that anyone who's actually acquiring just sees that you've set up for this. So I know there's a great argument that Sean was talking about. He owned Dynamics. He said, well, this is what I've done with Dynamics. Talk about Nigel Frank, and then think what we can do in the SaaS market, think what we can do in the other markets, think how we can take this internationally, think how we can grow the contract piece out. So he achieved that. And then basically the story, and how important is your story when you're trying to gain value. There's a fine balance between investing early doors so people see that you're committed to it, then they pile in, or you trying to keep all that money in a pot to maximize your value, but then they realize that they're going to have to fund any of your future growth. How do you advise people about how that really fine balance between cash today, but it's all to do is getting in the psyche of what the potential acquirer is going to think? Where are you on this journey? Or are you just trying to milk it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and as you can appreciate, it's quite an open, broad area and requires more than 30 seconds, Gary, to really give context. However, to try and give an answer, so I always would encourage my clients to make the right commercial decisions by their business as if there is no transaction in the offing, because typically that will mean you'll make the right decision. And you should never feel compromised, i.e. you are a director, you are a shareholder of the business. Your job is to make the right decisions by the business in which you are a statutory director of. Of course, there's a conflict of interest because you're a shareholder. So who wants to go and set up, a new office in New York, which is going to sink in year one, £250,000, if one thinks that might have a negative impact on the value of the business? But let's play that out, because actually, if you do the right thing for the business and there is strategic reasoning as to why that is the right thing for the business, rather than, a response, an ill-considered response, then actually it shouldn't negatively impact value. So let's talk that through to the nth degree. So if a business, an IT recruitment business, decided to set up their third location in New York, Gary, and they committed to a year one expenditure of £250,000 to get their serviced officers, to hire a team of 2, a consultant and a resourcer, and they were going to write off £250,000 of cost in the first 12 months. And at that point, the business was approached by a potential acquirer. Well, what would we do? Well, we would do this. So first of all, I'd argue that the £250,000 of cost is an investment. It's an investment that will give rise to turnover and GP growth in time. But during that 12-month window, it will be a cost, and therefore arguably could be added back to profit when calculating adjusted profit for valuation purposes. If a buyer said, well, that's all very good, Carl, but with respect, that £250,000 sunk cost could be an investment if it comes good. But what if at the end of year one, we decide that actually those 2 heads were not necessarily the right individuals for the business, they are exited, and it's a £250,000 cost with no value to come. Why would we account for that as an exceptional one-off cost? At that point, I'd say, well, actually, because it is a write-off and because effectively that office opening will not be pursued further, arguably it is a clearer write-off and a one-off exceptional cost and should be added back. If the argument doesn't stick, however, I think another argument is to focus in on multiple. So if in fact we find that that branch becomes successful, but still is a loss-making branch in year one, and that was in line with business plan, then even though profitability might have softened, Gary, to the tone of £250,000, what we actually now have is a US branch, which is, from a tax and legal perspective, operational, which anyone who has a business in the US will appreciate that's not a walk in the park and comes at a cost. And of course, heads can be added. So in that instance, arguably, the multiple may have gone from 5 to 6 times. And if the pre-tax profit of the business, pre-opening this loss-making location, was £500,000, and they've then just opened this loss-making location, which brings it down to 250,000, at a multiple of 6 times, actually, the value of the business has gone up by 250,000. So arguably, you end up as a shareholder in the same position value-wise because the multiple's gone up, but the profitability's gone down. So those are the types of things, Gary, one has to be considering. But for sure, doing the right thing by your business should always result in more shareholder value.
That was a long answer.
Well, it was, Gary, but you know quite well. Why would I choose to deliver an answer in 3 words when I can do it in 3 minutes? You know me, Gary.
It's a really interesting dynamic because that's the big stuff. But it's all about telling your story. I always tell people, treat your business like it's the most important thing to you. Make more money every year. Treat it like it's your baby. Develop it and get it a business so someone wants to buy it, not that you want to sell it. That's brilliant.
Totally right. Totally right, Gary.
Buddy, I know we're running out of time. I know you've got other things to do. Can I just say thank you so much for giving me your time? You're an absolute diamond. One of the good guys, as I said. I think the detail that you gave us there was exquisite. So really, thank you very much on behalf of everybody. Carl Swansbury, everybody. Thank you, buddy.
My pleasure, Gary. Thanks for your time, Gary.
Right, mate, you're an absolute ledge. Thank you for that. We'll work out what we're going to do with this, and I'll show you before we post it.
Yeah, how was it, Gary? Did we cover the right content?
Mate, it was absolutely brilliant. It's supposed to be like 20 minutes, bish bash bosh. Just give people an insight as who you are, what we're doing, but there was some proper gold in there, and I love that as well. So that's really, really cool.
Good.
Have you seen what Paul Herman's doing with his new blue? What's it called?
No, I haven't.
I'll go check it out. It's called. I've lost it. It's Blue Box something. Check his blue box out and you'll find it.
I'll have a look at it.
He's passing leads over for 1,500 quid. Really clever.
Okay.
But that was gorgeous. Right, you are fab. I need to shoot because I've got Marcus on the other line. Thank you, buddy. Speak to you soon.
Great to see you, Gary. Take care, bud.
See you, mate. Cheers, bud. Bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye.